You can be seated. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to River Lake Church. My name is Nick. We believe church should be relevant, simple, and real. And before we get too far, we've got a special announcement about that guy right there. He had a baby. Oh, yeah. That is Aniston Marie Edwards. Yeah, I messed that up first service. So anyway, hey, if you want to congratulate Jason, I said this first service, he loves hugs and like deep, tight hugs, okay? So like get in there, okay? Just pick him up if you want to. You know, if you're a lady, don't do that. That'd be weird. But, you know, like get in there, give him a hug. That would be great. So anyway, hey, we are so excited about our latest brand new member at River Lake Church. She is adorable. I got to see her live. Did you see people live? That's weird. Anyway, I got to see her the other day. So anyway, we're excited about her. All right, so hey, we are in the middle of a series entitled Clickbait. And today I want to talk about something that I believe, I don't care where you are, I don't care whether you're 5, 15, 50, 105, 155, you have at some point struggled with this at some point in your life. And the temptation is this, because I'm going to walk through it, and as soon as I say it, there's going to be some of you that you are going to discount what I'm going to say because you're going to think to yourself, I'm not going through that right now. But I promise you, you will. That if you kind of hear where we're going to go today and you kind of like dismiss it, you will need this at some point in your life, because today we're going to talk about a feeling of helplessness. A feeling of I can't change, fix, control it. I will never forget the moment where I felt this more than any other time in my life. My wife and I, we had just had our first son, Nicholas, and my wife has asthma. And if you have asthma, you can kind of relate to that whole deal, that whole sensation of you can't breathe. It's very scary. And I can't relate to that or know too much because I don't have that. But if you have that, you know what I'm talking about. And we had Nicholas, and her hormones were all messed up. And normally she's all good. But I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and my wife looks at me and says, I can't breathe. But she said it a lot harder than that. So we rushed to the hospital, and to be honest, at that time, I'm like, okay, this is cool. We'd been in the hospital before, you know, kind of normal kind of routine, not good, not great in any way, but we've kind of done that before. But for whatever reason, this time was different. And we got to the hospital, and it's getting worse and worse. And we finally get into a room, and there's this moment where you can kind of see in somebody else's face fear. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure the nurses were amazing. I think if you're a nurse, man, I got an behind the scenes look this past week on what you do. You're amazing. You guys work so incredibly hard. But in that moment, because I'm a fixer. If you're a fixer, you know what it is. Like I'm a control person. I can do it. I got it. I can handle it. I can fix it. I'm smart enough to kind of fix most things. I'm smart enough to kind of deal with things. I'm strong enough to kind of mess with things. Like I get things done. And I'm in the hospital, and my wife, I can see it in her face. And I'm one of those people, and I think this is a guy thing. I don't know about women, but it's a guy thing. That I'm looking at her thinking, if I could swap with her, I totally would. I'd much rather, I can handle it a lot easier if I go through pain and suffering than if my wife goes through pain and suffering. And I can see it in her face, and she is turning different colors, and she can't breathe, and I can see it in her. She is scared. And I feel helpless. I feel in that moment because there's nothing I can do. I can't give her a shot. I wouldn't even know what kind of shot to give her. I've been to the nurse's desk like 27 times. I don't think they liked me very much, just so you know, okay? Like there's this like, oh, you again, you know, I am begging, borrowing because I can't do anything. And the only thing I know how to do is just kind of sit back in the back. And the nurses were there and the doctors were there and the whole deal. And they told us a little bit later they're about 2 to 3 minutes away from, I think they call it a trach, cutting her throat open because her throat was slowly closing. And they couldn't get it to stop. They kept pumping more drugs in there, kept doing different things, kept giving her, you know, kind of those inhaler things or whatever. Nothing was working, nothing was working. And in that moment, I'll never forget it. It was the most helpless moment I've ever felt in my life. Where I thought, God, there is nothing I can do to fix this. If there are people around me, and they can fix it. There are nurses and doctors around me, and they can do things and they cannot do things. And what they do determines whether my wife will live or die. But I cannot do anything. I am completely helpless. And again, in this room right now, there are people in here, you have felt the same way. Maybe not with a hospital, maybe with a hospital visit. But this is the clickbait. The clickbait says, you're helpless. I'm helpless. We're helpless. And where I want to go today is this, that too often when we think to ourselves, I'm helpless, it leads to the second conclusion, which is not accurate, which is also then, therefore, I must be hopeless. Because that's what happens, right? See, in this room, there's some people, and you've got some kids. And when you were 5, you didn't feel helpless because you could pick them up and put them in the car, right? But now they're like 15 or 25, and they can pick you up and put you in the car. I mean, it's no longer, you feel helpless because all of a sudden you can kind of feel them pulling away. There's some external friends, or there's some external issues, there's some stuff, and they're 15 or 25 or 35, and you can kind of feel them go away. And listen, you're trying to fix it. But you know, you can't fix it. You can't force them. You can't force them to do that. There's some people, and you're married in here today, and your spouse, or maybe it's an ex-spouse, I don't know what it is, but all of a sudden they're doing things that are messing with you. It's not that they can, listen, other people mess their own life up, but when they start to mess up your life, like their decisions affect you, all of a sudden you feel helpless because you learned a long time ago you can't control people. You have a hard enough time controlling yourself, right? I mean, you have a hard enough time controlling your own behaviors. Let alone to look at somebody you love or care about or you're in a relationship with and say, listen, you better stop because you're messing me up. Your parenting style's messing me up. Your spending habits are messing up our budget and I can't do something now. Or for some, and listen, you're financially struggling and you feel helpless because all of a sudden something broke. The car broke down. The air conditioner broke. And you get a bill for $4,000. You get a medical bill for $12,000. And you're looking at the number, and you're looking at your bank account, and there is a massive gap in between what you owe and what you can afford. And you feel helpless. There's some teenagers in here, maybe early 20s. And your parents are making decisions for you, and you feel helpless because you know the right thing to do, and you know what you should do, and you know where you want to go, and you know who you should date or who you shouldn't date or what you're spending time, whatever. And again, but there's somebody above you who is in control of you, and you feel helpless. Or maybe, I think many of us can relate to this. You got a boss. You're an employee. You got a boss. And you know what should be done, and you know the right way to do things. You know how you should go about kind of fixing things or whatever. You see things so clearly, what should happen, what shouldn't happen. And you got a boss, though. Your boss doesn't like you. Your boss is just oblivious. I don't know what it is, but again, he's making decisions. She's making decisions about the company, about the future. And you can kind of see what's going to happen, and they don't see it, and you're trying to help them, and yet they don't see it. And yet you know their decisions are going to affect your livelihood. You feel helpless. For some, it's a sickness. You didn't ask for it. You didn't want it. But you got a phone call from a doctor. Or you woke up one day with a weird pain. And now there's a trajectory in your life, and you can't fix it. The doctor said that, listen, there's a trajectory, and you can kind of numb the pain, or you can kind of maybe make it feel a little bit better or whatever, but listen, there's an end in sight, unfortunately, in some way. And you feel helpless because you know there's nothing you can do. And today, what I want to walk through is, what do you do in those moments? Because every single one of us, we're going to have those moments. Every single one of us, we're going to want to try to control it, kind of fix it, kind of make sure that we grab a hold of it and we can do it, because that's like me, and I believe many of you, if not all of you, you're like me. We're going to fix it. What do you do in the moments where you all of a sudden you look around, and because of a situation or an illness or a finance or whatever, you come to the conclusion, I'm helpless. What do you do when it dawns on you? But I can't fix it. Somebody else's decisions, somebody else's bad decisions are going to adversely affect your future. If you got a Bible, I want to encourage you to open up Acts chapter 27. If not, we'll put it up on the screen. But we're going to look at a story about a guy named Paul. And Paul is this incredible, just Christian pastor. And if you read the stories, if you didn't grow up in church, that's okay, because Paul is this incredible Christian. He wrote a third of the New Testament, okay? Like, he is like wise beyond belief. He follows God. He talked to Jesus face to face. You probably haven't done that. Like, he did that. And he is an example of, just because, you know what, you live a right life and you're a good person, you do the right things and you give and you serve, like, it doesn't mean everything is going to go your way. And we're going to pick up a story where Paul feels helpless. And we're going to see what he does. Acts 27, verse 1 says this. When it was decided that we would, Luke is writing this. Luke is the author of Acts, so he's kind of partnering with Paul. So when he says we, I want you to think Luke is there with Paul as a partner. We decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners. Again, I want to pause here really quickly. Other prisoners. Here's the setup. Paul is a prisoner at this moment. And prisoners are helpless. Like, they don't get to decide where they go. They don't get to get up in the morning and go, you know what, I'd really like to go to the beach today. You know what, it's fall break. I'm going to go to Destin. I'm going to go to the Gulf Shores. Prisoners have zero control of their life. They're normally in shackles. They don't get to make, and other people are determining their future. Some of you today, you feel like a prisoner. You feel like a prisoner in your marriage. You feel like a prisoner in your finances. You feel like a prisoner because of what your kids are doing or what your kids are not doing, what your parents are doing or what your parents are not doing. You're a teenager and you feel like a prisoner. It feels like that. You come home and your parents, you feel like a prisoner. And you feel helpless. Paul is helpless. And it says we were handed over to a centurion. Centurion is a fancy name for a soldier. He was head over some other soldier men. He was one of the Roman centurions, and he had some people under him. So he was a leader from a warfare standpoint, from a battle standpoint, from an army standpoint. Be like a lieutenant, corporal, one of those kind of deals. He was a centurion named Julius who belonged to the imperial regiment. So this guy was large and in charge. This guy was making decisions for Paul, and what this guy decided, Paul had to do. Didn't matter what it was. To his success or detriment, Paul was helpless, and somebody else was telling him, you go here, you sit down, you stop, you can eat now, you can go to the bathroom now, you can do that. He is helpless. Story goes on. Much time had been lost. They're sailing around. And sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. So it's starting to get later in the year. And as winter starts to come in, storms become worse and worse. And back then they did not sail in the winter times because just gale storms come down, hurricanes, a whole deal. And so it is getting dangerous. And what we read in between verses 1 and 9 is that they're bouncing from location to location to location, being frustrated constantly. And all the while, Paul is being dragged through this mess. Dragged back on another boat, wondering, is it even going to make another shore? Dragged on this journey, wondering, am I going to make it out alive today? And it says this. So Paul warned them, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also. So here's the setup. Paul, he's a prisoner. Zero rights, zero credibility. His only claim to fame is, listen, I talked to God, but I'm not sure the centurion kind of believed that. I mean, because everybody kind of talked to God back then. They had multiple gods in the Roman Empire. He tells the centurion, who also is not a seafaring person. He's kind of a leader of armies. He knows land warfare, kind of stuff like that, but he doesn't know much about ship, kind of sailing and stuff like that. He says, listen, I can see what's going to happen. I can see the trajectory. I can see if we don't switch it, what's going to happen. We're going to die. Don't set sail again. And again, some of you in here today, this is your world right now, right? Because you're a mom or a dad, and you see who your kids are dating, and you see what's going to happen, and you're trying to tell them, and it's going to be disastrous, and I've heard about him, and I've heard about her, and I know where that's going to lead, and you're trying to warn them. They're not listening. You've got a friend maybe, a coworker, and you're saying, hey, you really probably shouldn't be friends with them on Facebook, but they're justifying it. They're going, oh, it's just Facebook friends. It's not a big deal, and I'm happily married. It'll be fine. And, I know that we used to date a while ago, but it'll be okay. It's fine. And again, you can see the trajectory. You can see where it's going to end up. Like we're going to see here, they're not going to see that. Maybe you've got a friend in their finances, and they're spending, and you're trying to help them. You're trying to kind of give them some advice or whatever, and they're just, now listen, there's some of you in here today. You're Paul. You're looking at somebody else, and maybe they even affect you. And you're trying to give them advice. They're just not taking it. It goes on. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship, which makes perfect sense, right? I mean, if you're a centurion, okay, if you know nothing about kind of seafaring issues, and you've got three people. One's the boat pilot. Two, is the owner of the ship, and you got one guy over here that says, yeah, I spoke to God last night, and he told me through a dream, don't sail. Who are you going to listen to? Pilot. That's what he listens to. Doesn't make it right. Let me just say sometimes that God will ask you to do things. God will ask you to do things that make no sense, no earthly sense, in order to test and see where your trust is. In fact, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says this, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. That word understanding is going to come back later. But in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make, meaning they're not straight. He will make your path straight. They're not. Paul's giving the centurion this kind of advice, hey, don't do this again. And everybody else is going, I don't see what the big deal is. Because what they say next is this. He goes on and says, since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. I don't know about you, but in the winter in Glasgow, Phoenix sounds pretty nice, right? I would love to winter in Phoenix. That sounds really great. It was warm, you know. But there is this thing, and I want to pull up a map because I was studying this week. And if you read the whole passage, there's all these different kind of towns, and it's very descriptive. We skipped it over because you probably didn't care too much, but I did, and there's all these different towns it goes to. But what I want to say is they're right here in Fair Havens, and where they want to go in Phoenix is right there. It's about 35 miles. And for a ship, it says on the ship that there's about 276 people, so about 300 people. It says that it was about 35 miles, roughly, 35, 40, but it was about a one-day journey. In their minds, it's what's the big deal? Paul, come on. It's one day. We've been sailing for a few weeks now. What's one more day? What's one more day? Some of you, again, you're being warned. And maybe you've drank your whole life and you've never had a problem, and yet somebody's looking going, hey, I think you're on the edge and the ledge, and you're thinking, what's one more weekend? What's one more date? What's one more thing? What's one more? They're looking going, what's one more? 35 miles. Be one day. Not a big deal. Paul, I think you're overreacting a little bit. It's not a big deal. It's 35 miles. So they set sail. Next verse. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity, so they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. It's like this. We got it. It's 35 miles. We're just going to sail along the shore. We're going to see the shore the whole time. It'll be fine. We're not even going to go out very far. We're going to always see the coast, so if something bad happens, we just kind of turn in there. And again, if you read this story, it's so fascinating. It says all of a sudden, this gale force northeastern wind just kind of comes down, and that boat specifically was not made to sail into the wind. And so they had to sail with the wind, and all of a sudden, it just swept the boat out to sea. Nobody could have predicted it. Nobody could have known. Messes the whole thing up. And they are struggling, and they are now lost. And again, there's some people in here right now. You feel lost. You feel helpless. You feel like a passenger along somebody else's voyage, and they're making decisions, and you could have seen it, and you could have predicted it, and you even told them. You told your spouse, you told your kids, you told your parents. What are you doing? You told that ex, you told your friend, and now you're having to pick up the pieces, and now you're having to do extra stuff, and now you're having to kind of fix things and kind of take care of things and deal with drama and deal with chaos. Why? Because somebody else's bad decision. And they're out lost to sea. And in the middle of it, it says, and it's a great start. I would encourage you to go back this week and read the whole thing. It says that they lost all hope. In fact, it says this, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. See, before the storm, the centurion, the pilot, and the owner thought they were in control. They had what we would consider power and control. And that's what we all strive for, right? I want to control. I want to fix it. I've got it. I can handle it. It's just one day. It's not a big deal. I've got it. Like, that's what we strive for, right? We work our whole lives for that. We work our whole lives for financial stability. Why? Because we want control. We know there'll be a storm. We want control. We work our whole lives for relational stability. We want control. Matter of fact, it gives us anxiety when we don't have control. And all of a sudden, God just kind of shows them all. You're not in control. The control and power That's an illusion. That none of us in here, let me just free some of you up real quick, because you're struggling right now, and you're tense right now, and you have high anxiety right now, because you're trying to fix or control or make a situation happen. You just need to understand right now, you are not in control. Control is an illusion. That even when the simplest one-day journey, it's Gilligan's Island, okay? Set sail for a 3-hour tour. It's not a big deal. Ship was tossed and turned. You're not in control. I'm not in control. And we want to be, because we want to fix it. But God shows them. I got this. You don't. But the problem is this, and it's what I said earlier. That when we feel helpless, when we feel all of a sudden like I can't fix it, it leads us, the clickbait, the headline, when you read the story of I'm helpless, the story itself leads us to the next logical conclusion, which is I'm hopeless. But I want you to know that just because you feel helpless doesn't mean that you've got to feel hopeless. Because Paul is a prisoner. He's on this boat. And he starts to pray. He starts to spend time with God. They're a few weeks out. They're running out of food. They have no clue where they're at. They're lost. They have not seen the sun in weeks. And this 1 day, 5-hour kind of journey down the coast has them wondering whether they're going to die or not. And if I'm Paul, I'm frustrated. But Paul starts to pray, and it says in the passage that an angel speaks to Paul and says, Paul, you're fine. I promised you. I promised you you're going to Rome. I'm going to get you there. And he reminds Paul of a promise that he had given to him weeks, months, years earlier. And so Paul stands up and says this. Gives him this big speech, and he says, so keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. There is a promise, and listen, it looks bad. It looks terrible. You all made some bad decisions. If anything, if you read it, it's kind of funny. Paul even starts and goes, hey, I told you. He's a little passive-aggressive, okay? I kind of like Paul like that, you know? He's like, hey, I told you all. You're kind of dumb, you know? And then he kind of tells them all, like, God spoke to me, though. We're good. We're good. Like, you cannot invalidate the promises of God. In fact, that's exactly what I want you to know today. We're gonna say it like this. That other people can't negate our promises. And that's our tension, right? We sit back and go, you're going to mess up my life. You're going to mess up my finances. You're going to mess up my future. You're jacking up our marriage. You're messing up my parenting style. Listen, other people, if you walk out of here with nothing else, other people cannot negate the promises that God has given you. Our promises. Paul was promised he'd go to Rome. And his temptation is look at that captain, to look at that owner, to look at that centurion and go, you are messing up my future. I've got an appointment with the leader of Rome. I'm going to stand before Caesar, and I cannot wait, and you're jacking it up, boy. God reminds him. Paul, other people, they can't negate your promise. I would just say this right now. To all of you in here, whether you're walking through a situation right now or not, the other people, your spouse, your kids, mom, your dad, your circumstances, a disease, a crazy situation, a medical bill, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that you feel hopeless in and helpless. But other people, their bad decisions will not negate your promises from God. What happens is this. They end up on a different island. They end up hundreds of miles away. Hundreds of miles away. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. But I want to give you an insight. Because it's one thing to sit back and it's one thing for me to say that. But what do you do with that? What do you do when the clickbait comes? What do you do when you feel helpless? How do you combat that whole deal? And thankfully, as I said, Paul wrote a third of the New Testament. So while Luke writes this story, we get a letter from Paul to another church that gives us insight into what he did in those moments. And I think in what we're going to read right now is the key, is the solution, is the freedom that we're looking for when we feel helpless. And it's this right here. It says this, do not be anxious about anything, To which, I don't know about you, when I read that, I think, Paul, you don't understand. You don't understand what I'm walking through. What do you mean, anything? Like, there's some stuff that you should be anxious about, right? Your kids are going away to college, and college is so hostile towards your kids, and you're worried about it. You should be anxious. Like, what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if they don't come back? What if they get hurt? What if, what if? All those things. Like, Paul would be right, and I believe if I would talk to him, he'd go, Nick, you don't understand. I've had opportunity to be anxious. I've been on boats. I've been on journeys with other people who made bad decisions. I think he'd look at me and go, Nick, you don't understand. Be anxious for nothing. But in every situation, by prayer and petition is just, it's like a stronger version of prayer. So like there's like your prayers, and then there's like a deep level, and I don't even know how you get there. I don't know how to shift gears, but there's like a deeper level of prayer and petition. With thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Paul writes it. He says, you're going to be anxious. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to look at a situation and go, oh, they're going to mess it up. Oh, I need a new boss. Oh, if I had more money. Oh, you're going to have those moments where you're anxious and your anxiety is going to go up. And he says, listen. Don't go on Facebook and vent. Don't text your best friend. Don't call your mama. Please don't call your mama. Especially if it's about your husband. Don't do that. He says, listen, pause. In the midst of your anxiety, pause and pray. Because in that moment, God will remind you of his promises. In that moment, because see, here's the deal. Maybe you don't even know this or not. I don't know. But there are some foundational promises that every single person in here, if you are a Christian, if you would say, yeah, I believe in God, there are some foundational promises like God will never leave you or forsake you. He says that. No matter what you do, he's never going to leave you or forsake you. That he says in a little different part, he says, listen, I've come to give you life and life to the full. And it may not feel like that, and there might be anxiety, and you might not see how it's going to work out, but there's some foundational promises that we all have, no matter what we've done, no matter our past, no matter where we're going, no matter what other people are doing, and other people can't negate those promises. But Paul says, listen, if you can pray, God will start to remind you. In the next verse, he says this, and the peace of God, because that's what we want, right? The peace. That's the opposite of anxiety. Anxiety is about worried about things that, let's be honest, 99% of the time almost never happen. He says, listen, so important. He doesn't say, and God will change it like that. He doesn't say, hey, listen, when you have anxiety, pray about it and God will fix it. God will change him. God will change her. God will give you money. No. He says, you pray about it. And when the clickbait comes in your mind, and you're tempted to go on it and go, oh, I'm helpless, and therefore I'm hopeless, and it'll never change, and they're never going to change, and I'm never going to get out of this debt, and I'm never going to be able to fix that. They're never going to come back, and da-da-da-da-da-da. He says, you pray. I will give you peace. God will give you peace, which transcends all, there's that key word I said earlier, understanding. It will not make sense. If you've ever somebody walked through a very tragic moment, and they are broken, but okay. They are wounded, but they'll be okay. They've lost somebody, but they're going to make it through it. And it's tragic, and it's terrible. But for whatever reason, they've got this kind of peace about them. This is what it's talking about. That there is a way for you and I to live our life no matter what is going on around us, with peace. To not allow the external world, to not allow other people, to not allow other situations to mess with our peace. Paul writes, he says, I've been through some journeys where other people were messing up my world, where I felt helpless, where I felt like I was completely messed up and not in control. But I prayed. And God reminded me of his promises. And all of a sudden, my hope came back, my peace came back, and it didn't make sense because we were lost at sea. And I had no clue how it would work out. But God guarded my heart and my mind. And that's the offer for you today. I don't know what you're walking through. I don't know where you feel helpless. I don't know what's going on. I don't have to. Because God does. And it says, you can pray, and it will be okay. Now, I want to wrap it up with this. Can we put that map back up there? This is where I want to end it, because today we're going to have a second part next week that I believe is going to speak to you in ways, because here's what I know, okay? Here's what I believe. Every single person in here, like, you had hopes and dreams and perfection for your marriage, for your second marriage, maybe for your third marriage, for your kids, for your job, for your future, for your health. You had Phoenix in mind. But for many of us, because of external situations, because of external things, because of outside force or whatever, you ended up, like Paul and that whole crew, 276 other people in Malta. And Malta stands, it literally means refuge. And we're going to unpack this all next week. I hope you come back. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait to share it with you. Here's what I know. What we're going to discover next week, and I just want to leave you with this, and hopefully it'll give you a little hope. Just because you took a detour doesn't mean it was a distraction from your destiny. Just because there's a detour, and that is a 478-mile detour. It is literally 10 times out of the way. And some of you right now, that's how you feel. You never thought you'd be there. You never thought you'd end up where you're at. You are struggling in areas, and you are miles and miles and miles and miles away from where you think you even should be. I want you to know that sometimes your greatest distraction can lead you to your biggest moments of destiny. That God is doing something in you, and you might not feel it. You might not feel like you want to. You may feel helpless, but God is behind the scenes, and he's using other people's mistakes, other people's mess ups, other people's arrogance, other people's problems, and he is maneuvering and managing the situation and moving you exactly to Malta, exactly to the place that he wants you to be. And so this week, as you walk through it, my hope, my prayer is this, that you would pause, that you would let God breathe into you in a way that maybe you haven't, that you would let him remind you of his promises, and that you would walk with confidence and boldness, that you would let go of some situations, that you wouldn't try to hold on to them, and you would acknowledge, maybe that's the next step, is acknowledge, God, I am not in control. You've got this, you're in control, and you're God. Would you all stand with me? I want to pray for us as we dismiss. I want to pray for your Malta. I want to pray for where you're at right now. And I want to pray for your peace. Because for almost all of us, we're not exactly where we hope to be. We're not exactly where we want to be. Let's pray. God, you tell us to pray and that you would remove anxiety. So I just ask right now that you would help us walk out in whatever situation we're walking through. Whatever anxiety that we had in our hearts, whatever thing that we possess, whatever thing that we hold on to, I pray that you would give us that peace that surpasses understanding. You would help us. You would breathe into our lungs life. It is your breath that gives us hope. It is your breath that sustains us. It is your breath that we need and live off of. We thank you, God. We praise you. We love you. Amen. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.
It's your breath.